Morocco is the only other country besides Israel that is not just occupying parts of another country, but denying that entire nation the right of self-determination in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions, international law. I mean, there are a number of countries, I believe, that morally have the right to self-determination, like Tibet or Chechnya or, West Papua. I mean, there are any numbers of those that morally I support. But legally speaking, just in some strictly legal spaces, Western Sahara and Palestine are the strongest cases out there. And so I think that by linking the two, it would both give the Sahrawis the attention that they deserve, that they have not been getting, but also I think it strengthened the pro-Palestinian movement, because the big argument against BDS and these kind of things is, why are you singling out Israel? Why are you singling out the world's only Jewish state? Well, we say, hey, when we oppose this occupation too, Morocco is an Arab Muslim country. It would diffuse. It would challenge that argument, and indeed, it would get us talk, instead of getting to just divisive arguments about the nature of Zionism or whatever. We could be talking about human rights and international law, which is really the ground where people are most solid, and talking about both Western Sahara and Palestine.
Let's do that. Let's continue now with the parallels to Israel and Palestine. I mean, it seems that the Western Sahara story invalidates basically all the reason the United States is giving for supporting Israel in its attempts at eradicating Palestine from the map, which is an ongoing effort for the last 70 years. Right. What are the other parallels to Western Sahara that are just, because it seems to me more and more this is sure. Very similar dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, ignoring UN Security Council resolutions, a foreign belligerent occupation, colonizing, I mean, settlers and that kind of thing, and the fact that they're able to get away with it because of Western support. That and I think it also underscores, I think a lot of people, especially outside the United States, simplistically believe that U.S. support for Israel is because of the Zionist lobby or the influence of American Jews. But the very fact the United States is willing to support Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara, even more so in terms of formally recognizing the annexation, which we haven't done for the West Bank, I think underscores that U.S. support for Israel is again more of a geopolitical thing. Because remember, the United States supported Indonesia's occupation of East Timor, right, prior to that. And back in the days of apartheid, South Africa's occupation of Namibia. So it's not like we need a well-organized politically ethnic group to force the United States to support an ally in engaging in an illegal occupation. Unfortunately, the United States is perfectly capable of doing that regardless. But I think that one parallel I think is important. I think actually East Timor might be a better analogy, because East Timor, for many people was seen as the hopeless cause, the triumph of realpolitik, that Indonesia had taken over. They wiped out 1/3 of the population. The UN had kind of dropped the ball. They, unlike Western Sahara, they weren't recognized by more than 2 or 3 countries as an independent a state. Even National Geographic started showing it as part of Indonesia and other world maps, so that people had pretty much given up on it. And like the Polisario, they had a small armed struggle, but they were outgunned, outnumbered. There was no way of moving things forward there. And again, the political repression made the nonviolent struggle very problematic, very difficult. In addition to that, but what happened was global civil society mobilized, and basically, especially in Australia, United States, Britain, Canada, they basically embarrassed these countries to end their support for the Indonesian occupation. And so, when the Indonesian economy tanked in the big collapse in the late 1990s, these countries had to say to Jakarta, hey, we'd like to help you out here, but this East Timor thing is making it politically impossible. And so the Indonesians agreed to a referendum, and they lost. The East Timorese became became independent. And similar in terms of Palestine, we have this global movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. We've seen how civil society has been mobilizing more and more. And hasn't changed things on the ground yet, but this may really be the move forward. Well, the situation in Western Sahara basically is that the armed struggle is not getting anywhere. Due to the nature of desert warfare and the new technologies of counterinsurgency that Morocco has, and the fact the Algerians do not want to get involved, and so there's not a risk of escalation in the favor of the Sahrawis. The nonviolent struggle, I'm a big believer in the power of strategic nonviolent action and civil insurrections and how it's successfully resisted occupations and dictatorial regimes around the world. But given that Moroccan colonists, the settlers, outnumber the indigenous population by such a wide margin, that makes nonviolent resistance. I mean, if there's a total general strike by the Sahrawis, the things can still function. So nonviolent action isn't really effective there. The diplomatic route is roadblocked because of the threat of French and American vetoes in the Security Council. So really, the only thing left is global civil society. And again, that's how we saw the East Timor become independent, because I mean, and the thing, Western Sahara is like East Timor in a sense that I mean, there are a lot of complex conflicts in the world, but something as basic as a colonized people not being offered the right of self-determination, for a powerful country to invade and occupy and oppress people in violation of the UN Charter, UN Security Council resolutions, World Court decision. I mean, if we can't get something as basic as this right, how can we resolve the more complex conflicts in the world? So it really does come down to, I think, educating people about it, because once people are educated about it, it's really, really hard to support the Moroccan position. And I think just as with support for the Indonesian occupation, I think Western governments would have a hard time explaining it to their people if they indeed, find themselves actually asking questions about it.
Yeah, but that's the only hope I have, because right now we are seeing in front of our eyes for the last 2 months, we are seeing the justification of genocide by our governments in the West, in Europe, and in the United States. The case for eradicating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And we see how, for the Israeli conflict, the entire idea is to use this effort, to use this moment and push the Palestinians from Gaza into the Sinai, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's no question. We're talking ethnic cleansing. We are talking about a bombing campaign against the civilian population that does indeed meet the international legal definition of genocide. But we all, but at the same time, let's remember that we have seen, both the not just the Iraqis, but the NATO-supplied Turks in genocidal campaigns against the Kurds, and not too long ago, and generally there is this double standard that we have talked about in terms of what allies of Western countries can do. I mean, I keep thinking about the fact of the bombing of Serbia. Given what the Serbs were doing to the Kosovo Albanians, but 3 times as many Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza as Kosovo Albanians during the war with Serbia. In the case of Serbia, NATO bombed Serbia. In the case of Israel, we're helping them bomb the Palestinians, and so. But I think that the one difference I think we do have, and I'm speaking as someone who's been involved in the Palestinian issue since I was a teenager, so we're talking over 40 years now, is that I've never seen global civil society react quite the way that it has been. We've already seen a number of European governments, as well as Canadians, some others who were pretty much supporting Israel initially, have now finally come around to support a ceasefire. And I can't help but think it's because of the popular outrage. And I'm less sure about the data with Europe, but I think it's probably true with Europe as well, because it's certainly true of the United States, that there is a huge generation gap in terms of attitude towards Israel-Palestine. I mean, I think with the exception of LGBTQ issues, I don't know any issue that parallels age and political attitude more than Israel-Palestine. For people of my generation, Zionism was seen as a national liberation movement for an oppressed people. This generation sees it as a colonial settler enterprise. This generation, conscientized by Black Lives Matter, institutionalized racism, obviously sees parallels with what Israel's doing, not to mention the growing awareness of indigenous rights in North America, Australia, New Zealand, elsewhere. And so we are really seeing kind of a shift. The Holocaust is another generation removed, so there's less of the guilt, the Western guilt around that. So I think in a whole number of levels, we are seeing a real paradigm shift in how the world views the conflict. The problem, of course, that's not young people who are in charge of governments. It's people who are my generation who are in charge of governments mostly, and they are in the old paradigm that tends to see Israel as a bastion of the West, and the home of an oppressed people that need to be defended from those who are trying to wipe them out.
Although there is a bit of hope there, because the demographics of this channel is that the vast majority, the big majority of people are over 50, and about more than a third are over 65. There is a good part of people in the older generation that actually that see the conflicts for what they are. And I think like focusing on Western Sahara as you're doing and then comparing those really lays bare the actual structure of the international system.
Yeah.
So that's why, to me, the question is not, oh, is the US really standing up for the rights of these oppressed? Of course not. It's all geopolitics. Of course not. The question is, can public uprising and public disobedience also with the current narrative actually shift this political tide? And so the question for the West Saharans is whether or not the Palestinian cause will actually now, whether this is a tipping point. If it isn't, Western Saharans are, I mean, that's basically lost. But you're saying that Timor-Leste shows no, that's not necessarily the case.
Exactly, and I think this could be an opening, as a whole lot of people are getting involved in the Palestine struggle and solidarity works than that previously were not involved, because the horrors being inflicted and the culpability of their governments has mobilized not just a new generation, but even, I mean, I'm just stunned about people I've known since I was a kid, who never had any particular interest in this issue, are having these pro-Palestinian memes on their Facebook profiles and things like that. So bringing in Western Sahara would be really important. I think and it's interesting. Just a little aside for a moment. The Western Saharans, like other Arab peoples, have long supported the Palestinian struggle, and even more so because they see the obvious parallels. But the Palestinians, in large part, haven't returned the favor. Outside of some left-wing intellectuals, the Palestinians, have generally been pro-Moroccan, because the Moroccan government is an important player in international affairs. Fatah has largely been pro-Moroccan. In fact, it was Yasser Arafat who personally persuaded Nelson Mandela to delay recognition of Western Sahara when they got majority rule. His successor, President Zuma, eventually did. It was the Hamas banned the Palestinian Sahrawi Solidarity office in Gaza City, shut it down. So both the Islamists and the mainline of Fatah have not, unfortunately, returned the favor, but there still is the obvious connections among at least people in the Arab left and elsewhere in the world is apparent. In fact, I think one thing I would actually help, and one thing I've been suggesting with some of these student solidarity groups that are pushing for divesting the endowment shareholdings in corporations that are supporting the occupation, the settlements, like Motorola, Hewlett Packard, Caterpillar, those. That in demanding divestment from those companies, also demand divestment from companies that are supporting the Moroccan occupation. in other words, have BDS go after both countries. And the reason is that Morocco is the only other country besides Israel that is not just occupying parts of another country, but denying that entire nation the right of self-determination in direct violation of UN Security Council resolutions, international law. I mean, there are a number of countries, I believe, that morally have the right to self-determination, like Tibet or Chechnya or, West Papua. I mean, there are any numbers of those that morally I support. But legally speaking, just in sort of strictly legal spaces, Western Sahara and Palestine are the strongest cases out there. And so I think that by linking the two, it would both give the Sahrawis the attention that they deserve, that they have not been getting, but also I think it strengthened the pro-Palestinian movement, because the big argument against BDS and these kind of things is, why are you singling out Israel? Why are you singling out the world's only Jewish state? But we say, hey, when we oppose this occupation too, Morocco is an Arab Muslim country. It would diffuse. It would challenge that argument, and indeed, it would get us talk, instead of getting to just divisive arguments about the nature of Zionism or whatever. We could be talking about human rights and international law, which is really the ground where people are most solid, and talking about both Western Sahara and Palestine.
Yeah, because the thing is quite easy that people actually understand injustice. When you see people being bombed and murdered and killed and memed, and you also see their lands being taken away, something in us moves. And that's like, it's empathy. And there are a few principles that we can go back to. The other one is, of course, self-determination, which would be another way of solving other problems, because, asking the people in the Donbass and in Crimea, okay, who do you want to be part of? And let's have an actual internationally recognized and monitored election. But this is something that the great powers, actually, they don't like that, because they know this might turn against them on both sides.
Exactly. So I think, so again, I think the having, there is, we really are, and the tragedy that's unfolding in Gaza is very much a teachable moment on a whole number of levels. And this would be a very, very good time, to see more activism on Western Sahara. And we have seen some of that. I mean, there's some countries in Spain, there are a lot of solidarity groups in Norway for various reasons. It's been a big issue, especially among student activists. I mean, there are people who are doing some work about Australia. That there's a lot of interest in it, because a lot of the people who are formerly involved in the East Timor struggle there, where it was very strong, see the obvious parallels. And so, building on a global movement and piggybacking where appropriate with Palestine, I think is really the way to go here.
David Zunes, you just gave me great ideas for how to connect the picture also in a fruitful way for moving forward. I would like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.